Hey y'all, it's Sarah, and this is what I'm working on this week. So you can see I cheated and I went ahead and put some of my stencil stuff in. And I did that mostly to save time because there's a lot of different options, and I think I want to stick with this theme for the whole month. So I'll continue to elaborate on some of the details, but I want to talk about this. So I have these Dollar Tree stencils. Let me slide this out of the way. These are all from Dollar Tree, and they have several cute boho style stencils. They're almost a vinyl-like stencil. They're very flexible. They're not as stiff as your average stencil, but they had a lot of interesting elements that I really like. These are, I guess they're considering these boho style. I'm in Texas. To me, this is a lot of Texas style. Weirdly enough, down here, they decorate with cow heads and things like that. So, to me, this is kind of Southwest style, maybe a little boho style, whatever you want to relate it to. But I want to show you where and what I stenciled and what I'm playing with. And we're going to add a lot of details to these to really make it your own. And I want to show you, I did a sample because I have an old planner that I play with, and I want to show you how to turn these plain Jane stencils into something like this. So that's part of the reason I went ahead and stenciled them out, so you could look at the stencil and see they're not bad. Like, in all honesty, if you look at this guy, this cow head, it's not bad. But I felt like I could take it a step further. And that's what I'm going to do. If you notice, I did it a couple different ways. I have traced it out pretty much exactly as it comes. I have traced it out and left some elements off. And we're going to add some elements. Let's jump in. Same thing with the feathers. I have traced them out. They are not bad. But once you trace them out, you're going to realize they're kind of plain Jane. So let's get started on some things. I'm super excited about this one. I loved my practice results. This might not be a vibe for everybody, but for anybody in the South or Southwest, you may have fun with this idea. I'm going to be using tans and aquas on this. I want to do a couple of things because I haven't already, and I went ahead and you notice I drew in some places that I typically don't. So I'm going to have to work around that. We'll see how I manage to do that. Mostly, I just wanted to play with this design. So I'm going to go ahead and pull these out. I've got mine out of their book so I can come in with my ruler. Let's see how well I can work around what I already stenciled in, because somehow I got myself too excited and didn't think about the elements that I usually want to add to my page. So let's work around that. I'm still going to come in and try my best to get the little slots for certain things. And they may have to go in different locations this time around. That's okay though. I want to do my best to make one long stroke. Obviously, I can't do that because I have art elements in the way, but I'm going to try. So I'm making my spot for my meal plan, and I'm just using a tan kind of color because I think it'll work fine with the color scheme that I'm going with. And I might even try to get my hydration spots in here. I might miss a day or two. I think I'll be okay. Next time I'll think a little better ahead. But otherwise, I think I'll still be okay. I've got plenty of room. I don't have nearly as active of a lifestyle as maybe a lot of people do, but there are still things I personally need to keep track of. So I'm going to try to get it all in. And honestly, I don't think that's too bad. at the top, that might be a problem. That's usually where I put my weather, is at the very top. But if you notice, I put all these cute little bead works and things like that. So I'm looking to see where I might can throw my weather in. Let's try it. I don't know. I wonder if I could squeeze it. I don't want to squeeze it in there. I'm going to try it here instead, in this middle section. This will be a little weird for me. So that's not my normal place, but maybe I'll find I like it in a different spot. I always put it at the top, but I might find that I like the change up. Out of habit, I tend to just put it there because that's what I'm used to doing. Okay, so I have a couple dividers in for some things that I know I'm going to need, and I'll try to work those in that way. Let's get started on some details, because that's the part that had me excited, is turning these things into something way more detailed. I'm not afraid to use stencil for my doodles or my artwork. I don't feel guilty about it because I'll always elaborate on those stencils. And these Dollar Tree stencils were just too cute to pass up. So let's get started on those. Everything I have pretty much stenciled in so far, I've just used this Dollar Tree Clip Click. It comes in a multi-pack at Dollar Tree. It's just a ballpoint pen, and it's probably one of my favorite pens to draw with. So I want to point out, I realized once I stenciled in, and I'll show you this. Let me show you how this stencil looks. So to save yourself this problem, when you set this stencil down and you are outlining it, on this inner section right here, this inner portion of the feather, don't trace this part. Now you'll want to trace this center, this very center, but when you're doing this outer portion, just leave out this section right here. Obviously, I didn't do that, and I've had to go in and try to erase it or cover it, and I think I'll be fine once I get my details in here. So let's go ahead and start working on that. The first thing I want to do is, if you see on here, that center line, that stem of that feather is a little broken, and I did not go all the way around those oval sections there. I just went down the sides of it. And now I want to try to connect all of those little gaps. And it's okay if you don't get it perfect, because we're going to add a bunch of little flicky lines that will hide a lot of imperfections, I think. And if they don't, then it will be my planner that I made mistakes on, and you won't have to, because I'll have helped you realize don't make that mistake. So at this point, I've just tried to connect the lines for that stem. And up at this point, I just pulled it down, and then now I've just got like a long skinny line. So that's my first portion of adding the details. Let's take it even further. So my next step is I'm going to start using a light flick of a line. And when I say a flick of a line, my pressure is probably a little heavier when I start out, and then I'll lighten that pressure up as I bring that line down. And that's part of why I like these pens, is because they do, the ink does apply differently depending on the pressure that you put on it. So at the same angle that this goes down, that's where I'm going to make my flicks come down. I want to try to get them fairly close together. You guys can see that. Some are going to be longer, some might be shorter. Hopefully this will help cover anywhere that I needed to kind of blot out where I outlined my stencil, maybe not as correctly as I could have. So we're going to continue down this entire little feather by making those flicks lighter and darker. And that's kind of where I'm starting. I may make one side a little shorter than the other. At this point, I'm having to try to make mine a little longer than I might have, but I'm still trying to hide that one issue there. So now if you notice any place that I did kind of weird on this center stem, it's way less noticeable once these little marks are in there. And I might fade them out as I go up. Just a little. I think that should work for me. I'm going to do very similar on the outer edges, but I'm going to start from the outer edge and flick my way in. And even right here in some of the gaps. So in some of the gaps, I might even flick a long line up, just a long skinny line up in that gap. And I'm trying to avoid using the word feather your lines out, given that I'm working on a feather. But all of our feathers we're going to do this way, and their little gaps, their little broken areas. I might bring some lines up right there on that gap. Same for this one. And some of those lines even extend a hair beyond that. Don't think too hard about this part. When you start thinking too hard and you go in that perfection mode, it starts to make something like this frustrating. So you can kind of see. And literally that's all there is to it. On these little things right here, I might come down one edge of that and bring that line a little deeper, if you can see that. Maybe for that one, I'll do the same thing. If your lines overlap, don't sweat it. So we're just flicking away. This is a really good one to do while you're watching something or listening to something, because there's a lot of little busy work opportunities on this one. Now, one other thing that I might personally do, you could leave it just like this, but I think I am going to try to follow this line and flick down a little bit a couple of times and almost give it kind of a feathery look there at the end. Some of my lines I might even darken, particularly this skinny one here. Now, I personally am going to go down one side of this, the stem. I don't know what that part's called on a feather, but one side of it, I might take a line a hair darker. So I'm just going back over this line that I had here. It's a good time to clean up that line some if you can. And you can kind of see that almost gave a little more thickness, a little more shadow to that. Just to the one side. I don't know, I felt like it gave a little more roundness or definition to that. I might even throw a few dots somewhere in that top portion of that stem. I don't know, just to make it look like it had some kind of little texture. So around here, I could do the same thing, bring some lines up. I might even flick some curly looking things up here where they curl out a little bit. And I'm giving those little portions a stem of some kind, those little, I don't know, these little tiny parts there. So now we have quite a different look. You can take this as far as you want to. You could add way more than I'm adding, but I thought this was enough to give it quite a bit of detail in comparison to what it had. So that I enjoyed getting done. Let's go into, I'm going to start getting the drawing part done, or the addition to the additional details done, and then we can go back in and talk about how we're going to color this. So maybe I need to make this one two-part, because there's a lot of details on this one, but they're details that once you learn them, you can apply it to lots of different stencils and things like that. Okay, this one, I think, the reason I left it mostly blank, and I almost made a mistake and traced out the other portion, but it's fine because I'm putting florals on here, which will allow me to hide most of that. But one thing I did do on mine, and I want to let you look at that, is I did not come all the way up down this middle section here. If you notice, there's no real middle section to my little cow guys. I didn't necessarily like how that turned out when I drew it in fully like this was. So I just left it, and you can see there's a little gap. I'm going to personally fill in that gap just by hand. And it's as simple as, you can hope for a straight line. If you don't get a straight line, it's not going to matter. One other thing I might do is find the center of that and add a line, even though that sounds funny. If you'd have traced this other one, you'd have had a two-sided line. If you'd have traced up that side and that side, you'd have had two sides. I didn't want two sides to that, so I might just do a slight little flick right up that part. At this stage, I'm going to try to fill in this little eye gap where, let me just set my little friend up here so you can look at him while I'm working at it. So you can see where the stencil had to have the connections to keep it intact. So I'm going to fill those in some kind of way. And this is all I'm doing to fill those in. Right here, I might even do something. Let's see. I'm going to drag my pen super light right about there. Right about there. Maybe up towards his forehead. So I'm almost making a diamond pattern there, if you can see that. For this area right here, and you can see on this is what this should look like. I doubled that little band on this particular one, on this particular stencil. I came over and I did that same little band area twice instead of just once. Now I'm going to just try to connect those lines like that. So now it looked like it had two of those little bands instead of just one, just to make each one of them slightly different. Right here, where the horns connect to the head, I'm going to come out just a hair, because I feel like that point would be a little wider. So if you saw that, I came out a hair wider than the horns themselves and brought it down onto the skull. Same on that side. And let's start throwing some details in. Let's start getting a few of the age lines in and things like that. So one of the things I did is here around the eye sockets, I'm going to drag just a couple faint lines somewhere up around the skull, around that socket. I'm going to do the same thing with the horns. We're going to make this look a little aged out. So I decided to try to stay in the curve of the horn itself. So I might bring some lines up this way, like that. I might do a little squiggly line up there. Same with this section. I might do a little squiggly line and a dot there, and flick some of these fading lines up there. I'm going to do the same thing on this little band here, this little area here. I don't think this is a band. I actually think this is like still part of the skull itself. And I'm going to do just a few tiny little lines like that. I might come up and do some little squiggly wavies along this section, and possibly even somewhere here. I probably should go ahead and close this skull out, and I'm going to try to follow what the most likely pattern would be. Throw some lines down where this little area notches out from the side of the skull, and do the same thing here. Now we're already seeing a pretty big difference in the details just throwing these extra details on. So right here, you can see where this little part dips in. I want to try to keep fairly close to the same angle. So right there and right there, I want to throw those lines up, and then maybe a couple more. Same thing down here at the nose and mouth area. I'm just going to pull different lengths of lines upwards. However many you want to add, 3 or 4, just a couple is usually pretty good. I might do the same thing here around the eye socket. Especially if you had some spots that you didn't connect well or whatever. Maybe throw a few little dots in there. Right around this socket where there would likely be dimension on this thing. Throw a little line there. We've already got some good details going here, I think. And I'm just looking and tossing a few other dots in some places. Nothing major, just kind of give it an idea of some texture is what I'm doing here. So I'm pretty happy with that. Those details are going to be about the same for all of my skulls. I'm going to basically follow kind of that same idea of where I just threw those details in. I'm going to do that for all of them, and I'll let you look a little closer. That's already a big difference between just this plain stencil and this guy. So let's talk about adding some decorations. I'm going to move away from him because we're going to do florals on him. I want to talk about the ones that have some things on here already. This is closer to the original stencil. If you can see this little diamond pattern that it's got right there on its skull. Because I did not do this center section, I am missing this portion right here, if you notice. In order to fill that in, I'm just going to grab some kind of straight edge here to the side and try my best. I happen to have this little square one, and I think if I can align it just right here, I might can finish out this square pretty nicely. And I'm going to fill this square with some kind of jewel. I think I'm going to use the turquoise because I'm a big fan of turquoise. And my mother always told me that that was one of those strange things that I got from my grandmother. Because my grandmother came from South America, and my mom always said that she always had an entire arm of bangles, and most of them were gold, but some of them had turquoise gemstones mixed in with the solid gold bangles. She used to laugh at me when I was younger and would just run bracelets all the way up my arm. So same thing with this one. On that part, I just filled in the one band. This portion here. Oh, look, I forgot a whole side of his head. I think he might need that side of his head. So I'm going to go back in and add that. I will say with these stencils, if you're not used to using a rubbery kind of stencil like this, you do have to be a little cautious how you trace and outline because it is such a flexible one. But I could not pass these up. They were super cute. And living in Texas, I felt it was so fitting. I'm not doing anything right here just yet because I want to fill this in with some beading as well. But I will use my straight edge again and try to connect this line upwards. I could trust myself to try to get that straight up, but if you don't trust yourself, use a little straight edge. I'm going to try it this way. There we go. That wasn't too bad. So now those are connected. I'm going to add beads there. You can use the same stencil and use some of the circles on any of these stencils. This one's got quite a few circle options, so I'm just going to throw this one down here and use it right about there. Under where I did that, I'm going to put a circle just above that dangling feather. And I will do the same thing on this one. Now, these feathers are much smaller than the big one we did, but we're going to handle it the same exact way. So I want to connect this open section right about there. And I brought it down to a little bit of a curve. I don't know why. I just felt like it. You could just bring it to a point if you wanted to, but I'm bringing it down to some kind of little curve. And I'll probably do the same thing with this side, and I might curve it out the other direction. So to fill this one in, it's a little blockier. I know it looks like it's a little more geometric, but it'll still soften up and look like that. I'm going to start in these gaps first. That makes it easier to me, is to start in those little gaps and do my little flicks out. And then I might add some of the ones here. With it being so much smaller, it goes so much faster. So at this point, you've got a much different feather than this geometric one. I'm going to do the same thing on this one too, where I come in down the one side and maybe make that a little darker. I might straighten this out some too, since it looked a little wonky there. Here we're going to do the same thing. We'll just flick those down. You make it as full and fluffy looking as you want to, but just use a light touch on your flicks. And I think you're going to enjoy the results, no matter how many little flicks you decide to add. I'm just bringing that up just a hair. So I might throw a couple something down in that center of that feather the same way I did with the other one. So my little feather section, I'm not really doing a whole lot of this inner portion since these are so small, but I might add one or two here and there. Let's go ahead and darken this the same way. Already a lot more detail. Close his eyes in. Now, this guy has this headpiece. So you can still do the same details we did on the other one. Just work around the headpiece. So we're going to flick that up. Pull a few of those up. Maybe bring a couple dots or something right around that eye. And I'm just going to keep working around that same way. They might be a little different than the one I did before, and that's actually probably a good thing. I don't want all of mine identical. I might even flick some down from this middle section. I didn't do it on the other one because I knew I was going to have to make room for my flowers. Now, one thing that I want to do on this little square part, and I should have done it when I was trying to finish out my square, but I want to layer, like I want this to look like it's multiple pieces together instead of one solid headpiece unit. So I'm going to just bring a straight edge in and try to add some corners to this other section. So let's see how I do. It works for me. And I'll do the same thing on this side. So now it looks like more than one piece. There we go. I kind of like that. My next thing is I'm going to bring back one of my little stencils, something with a circle. I could probably draw these circles this small. I might could do all right, but I'm just going to show you this way. So on those other little side squares, I'm putting a circle in the middle of those. Like that. Now, I'm going to come in, let's see. I want to come in with some kind of oval. This is off of a house plan stencil, but it's got a lot of nice little ovals on here that I think I want to use one of them. And hopefully I'll find one that fits in here. I think maybe, I'm not sure which one I can squeeze in here. Let's try this one. Honestly, I'm going to skip this and I want to do this on one of my other ones. So let's skip that one. We'll do that on one of the next ones. As far as decorations go, I pretty much, this is what he's going to look like. I'm going to come in underneath this headpiece and throw a few lines there and maybe even a few coming up from it, behind it. Just like that. You might even do it here in a few little spots, just one or two. It's not required, but I'm kind of a extra person. If I can find a way to throw some extra details in, I totally will. So I'm doing the little flicks here up the horn, maybe a couple dots to feel like it's got some aged texture. And this guy already looks dramatically different, and they look different from each other. I'm going to do very similar with this one. The only difference is I might change a color scheme or how I do the scheme. One last thing that I want to throw on this, though. How I did the little curly feathers up there, I think I want to do it on these. So I'm going to throw a few of those on there. Don't ask me why, I just feel like, because. So I did, I threw a few little stray feathers here. Moving on to this guy, I'm just going to basically do all the same things that I just did as far as the head dress. I just may change a couple of the details. So one thing I might do different here is I think I might do a smaller bead than I did. Let's see, which one of these has the better options? This one has the better options. So I'm going to do a small bead just above the feather. I know there's a lot of detail to be thrown in, but it gives you a lot of options or ideas. And I'm going to go ahead and throw down my leather straps here. This one could be fun if you have, maybe if you have Native in your family. We do. As a matter of fact, my husband's family is registered through the Dolls Roll. So this might be something if you're celebrating some heritage one month. This might be one to help you feel a little more artsy about it. And if you noticed, I just threw some lines right across there above my bead, and I'm just going to color that little piece of strap slightly a different color, and you'll see when the color starts coming in that it just adds a different detail element. On my head dress, I'll come in and do the same thing. I'm going to add the beadwork. And I had intended to put oval in here, and I traced it out wrong to put an oval in here because I wanted to show you this is what I was planning on doing, and I might still can fit it in there. See this one? That's what I wanted to show you. I forgot, but that's okay because I am going to self-correct and adapt. I found a stencil with these little tiny ovals. Maybe I can find one that'll fit in here or that my pen will actually fit into. And we're still going to try to squeeze this in. So let's see if it works. Oh, I think I just barely made it. So I still got the opportunity to throw my little oval in. Don't worry though, I'm going to bring in more of these this month so I can add more ideas to it. All of my feathers, I'm going to repeat the same process. And I'll tell you what I used to get the certain looks. So, this one here, this dream catcher. I did not fill out the inside of this dream catcher. That was a lot. I did not have the patience to do it at the time. I was just outlining all the stencils while sitting with my family listening to a show that I had no interest in anyway. I will put this center portion in just so that when I go to fill it in, I know where the center is. So I did like that. I can just go in and make my little lines across however I want to do that. But I didn't take the time to do this entire thing. For these feathers, we're going to do the same thing. I'm bringing a line up right there to make it look like it's connected to that bottom bead. Everything else on this, I outlined basically as it was. I even did the inner portion of each feather, which, just to save yourself the headache, skip all of these inner portions on the big feather. This one is not as big of a deal because here's why. Once you connect it, if you connect it nicely, it won't matter. The larger one, that one made it a little more difficult because there was a gap. There was a pretty good size gap between the stem portion of the feather and where the feather started. So down at the end on this one, I'm going to try to bring some kind of point to it, some rounded off point. I might do just a line to connect those. You could bring like a little flick around. Just give it a little sharp tip. This right here is probably the hardest part of any of that. Trying to get this little center portion connected and have it look like it's flowing really nicely. That was probably the biggest struggle I had playing around with this idea. So for the tips of those, all I did was swing out a little. You'll just fill in these the same way. This one up here, this little dangly one up here, these dangly ones up here. These are all just a repeat of the my largest feather of my dream catcher. And don't forget that you can always flip it over and that feather will shift a different direction, so it'll look like you've got a couple different directions of feathers. So I'll do those off camera, since we've kind of already established how we're working the details into our feathers. And then we'll come back and talk about some of this stuff I got going up here. We'll start adding some color and letting the color do a lot of eye-popping details to these. All the details on my feathers are now finished out, and I just repeated the same process for everybody on the page. Let's talk about these little kind of dangly beads here. I just repeated basically, if you look right about here, I brought that up and started kind of repeating some of these patterns and alternating them all the way down. Obviously the lines weren't necessarily long enough, so I have to complete out the lines here with a ruler, and that was just no big deal. Actually, while I'm doing it, there's a few here that I could add a few more details to. So I might add maybe a bead or two to a couple of these. And I'll just throw those in. Here and there. You take this as far as you want to. You could do this all the way across the page. I chose to just do it in this area, but you could take it all the way across the page if you wanted to. Right here, I think what I might do is to connect this, I might line up some beads and I'm going to alternate the sizes a little bit. So I just threw some beads there where I'm going to connect this drop down here to my feather. And at this point, I just need to complete out some lines or finish out my lines, bring them all together. The same thing with the feathers that are hanging down. I'll do it on my my dream catcher, and I'm going to freehand those. I'm not going to worry about making them entirely straight. The ones that are dangling down, I felt like I wanted to get those a little bit straighter. And we're going to go over that with a marker anyway, so for instance, right here, I'm not worried about getting these lines straight. It's okay that they go in a little bit of a curve. As a matter of fact, you probably want them to go in a curve. Same here. They didn't have them on this original Dreamcatcher image. They didn't have any kind of lines there. While I'm doing this and I'm on this section, I'm going to just add something to connect these. If you've got a stencil that happens to line up with this circle size, that might make it even easier, but I'm going to try. I'm sure I have a circle somewhere that would fit that, but I'm just going to try to get it close to something. Right here at this connecting point where there's the gap, I'm going to try to close that gap. Just throwing a few lines in like that. So I'm pretty content with how that looks. Let's get into coloring because that was part of what was fun to me on this. So I'm just going to repeat a lot of the same colors. I'm going to use some tans and beiges and things like that, and then throw in a little detail with aqua. For my feathers, I didn't take that too far. I'm just using a very, very faint tan. I kind of think this says 106 in a brush tip line of markers, but honestly, you guys can see that has done worn off so much I can't tell. All I did for my feathers was I essentially wanted them to look mostly white or almost a creamy white. So rather than color the whole thing, I'm really just going right along these edges, and I'm not sure how much of this you guys will be able to see. This is such a faint color. So I'll throw a little color. I'm not wasting too much time on this. Don't think too hard about it. The more if you're like me, the more thought you put into something, the worse trouble it might get you into. I still might come down this middle section along that stem, and I might even drag it down that stem just to give it a little bit of some kind of color to it other than just white. I do love this color. All of my feathers I'm doing with this same color scheme. You could absolutely maybe tip some of your feathers in black, which would be cool. I did test that out and it looks nice, but for this example, I'm not even taking it that far. So right along these edges, you can see I'm not making this any kind of hard. I'm just scratching a little bit of this faint color down all those sides and somewhere down that one side of that center. Same on my little feathers. Over here, I'm going to do the same thing. And it's just a hint of color. It's just the idea that these are almost a creamy white. So, you can see, I'm not worried about whether or not I'm getting in the lines perfect. I'm not stressing over any of that. Don't stress this. This is supposed to be fun and playful. At least to me, it's supposed to be fun to get me motivated to want to do the chores on my list and things like that. So that gave just a hint of color. Now these feathers are almost a creamy type color. I'm not putting this color up yet because I'm using it as well in some of the same places where I might have done the lines on my skull. And I'm just throwing a little bit of ink down. There's no rhyme or reason to how I'm doing this. Just a little bit of color right along those. Maybe right along this horn area, across the top of the skull. And you really don't even have to do this. You could leave your skulls white. and go with it from there. So that wasn't too hard. There's already some color laying down. Let's go into what I did as far as adding some color to the horns. I went with a slightly, anywhere, some kind of slightly darker tan light color. And for the horns, I'm not doing the entire horn either. I'm just going to get a little color under this bottom side. Just a hair, and I'm going to blend that out some more here in a minute. But just a hair of that color under the bottom side of these bull horns. This is the same color I used for my divider lines, by the way. Now, I might use this tan color. I might could use it maybe for this point where they connect to the skull itself. So now that I've done that, I'm coming back in with the same light color and going over those spots just a little and pulling it up. And I'm pulling that up, and that whole upper section is still pretty much white. So I've kind of blended those two colors together. It's giving that almost a bone color look, I would say. Let's get into, let's go ahead and do some of the leather strapping or the leather ties. I just grabbed, I hope this is the right color for this. I just grabbed one of my super tips in a reddish brown kind of color. It's a lighter reddish brown kind of color. And I'm going to pull something in just to guide me as some kind of straight edge so I can maintain my line a little better. I'd say that's kind of a leathery color. It's not the one that I used to begin with, I don't think. And I'm not sure what color I use because like I said, I played around with this watching TV, but I'm still going to use this one. We're going to roll with it. When you're using a straight edge or something, when you go to pick it up, try to lift straight up on it. If you've been running a marker across it, if you lift straight up, as a matter of fact, I probably has an easier time with this one. If you just lift straight up and try not to just pull it to the side, you're less likely to smear that ink. So some kind of brown. And I'm doing it even in the little smaller gaps there. So down all of these, I decided to go ahead and use kind of that leather look. You could probably do them when we get ready to do some kind of gold tones. You could do it that same way. So anywhere there's a space, it looks like I might have left a circle out, so I'm going to come back in and throw that circle in there. If I can realign this, I think that's the alignment it had. There we go. I had missed one little circle there. I might would do the same thing on my dream catcher if you wanted to. This one up here, I'll go ahead and do. And let's jump into doing like the little leather strapping that's hanging down. So I'm going to pull some colors over here that I think I want to start with maybe a lighter color. And this is a Crayola Super Tip in a beige tan type color. It's, as you can see, it's a hair darker than maybe my tan highlighter. And I'm just going to flick down all of these where there's what is I'm perceiving as leather. Let's jump into some yellows. So I've got this color. This is a Michael's version of the Crayola Super Tip. And I know it says tan, but it's a tan with a kind of a mustardy yellow undertone. You could use something like this. Anything with kind of that mustardy yellow undertone is fine. We're going to add some other colors to it, so it'll help kind of bring it in that realm of gold looking. So anywhere that you might want some gold beads or a gold appearance, I think my little stars up here, these little star things, these little things, whatever you call that shape, I don't know what that shape is called. I'm going to pull in a little bit of color. If you notice, there are times I leave white spots when I'm coloring, especially if I get closer to the edge of something. I get a little nervous that I might go out of lines. And I usually work some of those white spots into my design, so I don't sweat that too much. I don't take too much with any of this very seriously. I make all kinds of mistakes. I know I make mistakes. I'm going to look at where I might want to throw the tiny gold beads. And I'm leaving some options. I'm not doing all of my beading gold. I'm leaving some options because some of these I want to do more in that turquoise range when I get down to it. So I'll end up doing the very same thing with the head pieces. I'm going to fill in the head pieces, the headdresses on these guys. So I'm going to go ahead and try my best to get in there somewhere. I almost wished I'd have started with a hair lighter version of this, but I think I'll be okay. I'm going to switch over to this one. Both of my, you could have done your headdress pieces. You could have totally done them in that leather look as well. I chose not to, but you absolutely could. Right here on this one, because I followed the actual outline of the shape, I'm just adding some details. It had a little indentation there on the stencil itself. So I'm just going to throw in like maybe a little dot on either side of that. So let me go back to filling this in. And I keep pausing in weird spots. My allergies are haywire, and I'm trying not to sneeze like crazy on y'all. Right here, I'm going to throw this gold in. So where I threw those little lines in, now I've got a little bit of like gold strapping right there. And I think maybe even this center section right there, I'll throw a little gold color in. So I think that's everywhere I want to add the gold. Next comes, what kind of aqua do you want to use? So I'm going to pull my little scribbly page over here that I keep nearby. Let's see which aqua. This has got kind of a blue tint to it. I don't know if I want fully blue tint. I kind of like this aqua. That one's got the aqua vibe to me. So that's the one I'm going to use. Pick something close to an aqua range. Or close enough. We'll work from there. I'll come in and Don't worry if you don't get your circles filled in perfectly. We're going to add details to those, to the beads, to make them look dimensional. So I'm moving all around and throwing my ink down, which I tend to do because it helps keep me from bleeding through. It gives things time to dry before I start adding other layers. And we'll talk about the flowers on this little guy. We'll go ahead and get started on those as soon as I get my beads up. That way they have a little time to dry while I'm working on his headdress. And I see a few spots that I've skipped as far as adding my strings or my leather. I might need to go back in and add a few of those things. So far, I think I've got most of my aqua applied. Let's talk about, oh, I want to do this little thing. I don't know why, I just decided it was, I'm going to tell you, trying to trace in those because they're tiny. Took a minute because I'm half blind and I had to use my strongest cheater readers that I've got. But I went ahead and did that one. I don't know why, I liked it. I thought it was pretty. So I'm just going to fill in. I'm rotating this out between the aqua and the gold look. So I'm doing a few of those dots as aqua and I'll come back in and do, or a few of those squares as aqua and I'll do. These are very hard to fill in. So if you got white spots on them, don't worry about it. Seriously, not a big deal. Look, I messed up on my little pattern rotation. I'm actually okay with it though. I don't think it's going to visually be that big of a deal. Where else did I see I needed to throw some more of the gold down? So I need to do my lines right here. This did have a nice little curve on it that I can trace to get this swoop down. So I just connected that. I don't even know if I have to connect those. Really, it doesn't look bad not connected. I could do it with the leather look, but you know what? I might just let these be a little more on the string side. On the very thin and narrow side. So there we go. We're already at something. Oh, I did forget an aqua spot. Right in the center here. I'm going to fill this in with some aqua. And while I've got the aqua in my hand, let's talk about getting the headdress. So I'm going to get a little closer so you can see some of the details to this. This may not be necessarily my strong suit, but I promise by the time I'm done, it will look like something. I'm just going to come in and make essentially a wonky looking circle. Try not to hesitate too much because you're going to cross over as you're coloring in. You don't want to make it bleed through the backside, but I'm going to do my best here. I'm almost doing a swirl all the way around of a circle and it's not even great. I tried to get that in the center the best I could. I'm going to bring in some kind of yellow-ish. I don't think I want to go as dark as what my little gold color has been. I think I'm going to go slightly lighter and then I can add some darker to it if I want to. So I may just come in with a regular yellow. Just to throw in, I'm doing the same thing. Just some wonky circles. However many you want to add. You guys can see that. These are going to be flowers when we're done. It may not look like it right now, but that's the plan. Now, how do we get it to look like some kind of something? I'm going to start in the middle Let's get really close. There we go. I'm going to start in the middle with almost like a little triangle looking bud. And my wonky circle is just going to be in a bigger form of wonky circle. And I'm coming around and letting some of those edges touch. If you can see what I mean. Sorry, I got all quiet. I was focused here. So that looks pretty close to me. I might try, as tiny as this is, I might try to throw some little lines in there for details. And no particular spot. It just makes it look like I did something a little fancier than I did. I will apply the very same idea to these little yellow dots as well, just on a little smaller scale. Maybe you can see some of the detail to that. It's a little harder to see this small. I don't think I can get much of the little tiny lines up in there. I might could get one or two, but I'm not going to get much in there. It's a little small for my abilities. Some of y'all might can do that, but it's a little small for my abilities, but that was close enough. It looks rather large at the moment, but keeping with the scale of that stencil, if you imagine the size of that stencil, these are actually really tiny. So you don't have to put that much detail into them. I might come in now with some kind of green highlighter, and I am choosing a highlighter at this point because of the chisel tip, because that helps me a lot personally get a leaf-ish kind of shape. So I use that chisel tip. I hold it at a kind of a 45-degree angle from wherever I'm wanting to make my leaf. And then I drag it that direction. So maybe you'll see what I'm saying. And I'm just going to drag some leaves. And right now it just looks like a couple random lines. When I outline them, that should help. And that just gives me a pretty decent spot to outline. And I'm just kind of wonkily, if that's a word. I said it and you guys understood it. I'm just doing kind of a wonky leaf with some jagged edges around here. I'm going to let this dry a little bit because I want to probably come back in and add a little bit of darker shades in there. But as we crossed over when we went in that circle, it does actually have some lighter and darker shades. I don't know if you can see that camera wise, but it actually does. So let's talk about some fun details. I am digging in to my little stash. I love my white gel pen. I do. Like, I absolutely love my white gel pen. I have a collection, or somewhat of a collection, of other gel pens. I don't think they're all that fantastic. It was a cheap set of gel pens. I'm pulling out a glittery one that's kind of in the gold range. I don't even know what brand these are. I've had these for so long. So I'm going to come in. Let's drag where we need to be. Okay, I'm going to come in right here with this one. This is not even something you have to do. I just did this because I liked how it looked. This one has some glitter shimmer to it. So right along this inner portion where those two connect, where I would want a little darker there, I am scratching a little of that shimmery glitter along there. I might do it around my stone some. And I don't know how well that's going to show up on camera, but in person, it just gives a hint of shine and shimmer to that kind of gold mask or gold headpiece. And I'll probably do something similar right here. It also gave a little darker color right here to make that headpiece look like it's definitely a two-piece section. I might swoop around my gemstones here, just halfway, like under the bottom, like a semicircle under there. And it's just a slight shimmer. You could do the very same thing on all your beads. So my beads, I might just do one bottom area where it would be darker on some of those beads, just to put a little sparkle in your life. If you don't have one of these, don't worry about it. The markers can do the shading part of it in the same locations. Or get out some glitter glue if you've got it. Throw some actual glitter glue on there. That could be fun. So I might do it on some of my beads. Maybe these small ones. It's easy to fill in these small ones. And I'm only doing like a half circle of the shiny part, the shimmery part. Just enough to kind of catch your eye. So I feel like that's all the places I might want to add a little shimmer and shine. Ooh, we're starting to look like something. I'm getting a little excited. So something else I might do, it's not necessary, but because I have a little obsession with this particular cool light gray. I don't know if I can get it to focus. It's called Cool Light Gray. I get these at the pop shelf stores. They sell them individually. So I might come in and throw a little shadow in some places. Maybe around my feathers to get them to pop a little. This is a really subtle gray, and a lot of times it barely even shows up on camera because it is that subtle. You don't have to do it around every item. You don't have to do it around any items, but if you do go to do it, I tend to stick to just one side of that little item and run the gray down it. And it's so subtle that you don't necessarily notice it. I might even do inside the little eyeball sockets here in a couple places. It's so subtle that you don't really even notice that you're noticing it, if that makes any sense. That's how faint this gray typically is. So it's that level of subtle. Went ahead and threw that in. I could do that around maybe the bottom of some of these beads to make them look like they're hanging down. Just to one side. I don't know the rules to this, guys. Like, I know there's an artist rule book. I don't follow it. I didn't even read it. I'm sure there is one. I just have never dove that deep into those kind of things. I wing it every time. I'm sure it's pretty noticeable. I think on the two that have like the headdresses, I might do it just at the bottom part of that headdress to give it a little dimension. Just throw it around these feathers. Just throw it anywhere. It's so faint, even if you mess up with it, nobody's going to notice. Now I can play with my gemstones a little bit. So the cool thing about some of these double-ended markers is it'll probably make this a little easier for me to stay in the lines on the smaller beads. And I'm going to pick a side. Usually I pick the bottom because that seems the most logical. I'm going to go around like a letter C along the bottom of most of my beads. Like all of my bead work, I might do that now that they've had time to dry. This is a pretty intense aqua. I would not suggest doing this back to back after you color them in. I'd let it have a little time for those beads. Because a lot of times when you do dot areas, you hesitate a little and it'll soak through or saturate a little more than you realize. So I'm just doing it kind of at the bottom section of all of my bead areas. And I never even filled that one in good. So all of my beaded areas, that's what I'm going to do. Now I can actually come in and throw a little darkness there into my flowers. I'm just picking some spots and throwing a couple lines in. So now it's got a little more dimension. Here's where the fun comes in on making your beads and your jewels and your tones look a little more dimensional. So one is my Uniball Signo, because at this point, I think you guys know I love this pen. And this is my Dollar Tree Crafter Square little metallic marker, which is not actually metallic. It says that. All the other colors in this series, the pinks, the blues, the greens, silver, gold, all of those are metallic. The white one doesn't show any real metallic shimmer, but it is a very thin, translucent white, and I love it because of that. So I'm going to pick a side, any side, and just do some kind of line around it. On your beads, you're going to do the opposite place that you did your aqua letter C around the curve of those beads. Now, in some of the small beads, you're really only going to be able to get a dot in there. And that's basically what I'm going to do to the opposite side of wherever I try to do that little C. I'm going to come in and do kind of a dot of this color. And it's a small thing, but it does have a nice little visual impact as far as making that bead truly look round. Maybe you can see that already. You can start to see now those beads are starting to look actually dimensional. They look like they're catching the light without really knowing too much of the rules on that. So just do a little dot on all of them. On my little guy here, I'm going to go ahead and try to get one up in there. A little easier said than done because the tip's a little wide on this, but I might even be able to fit one in there. I don't want to forget the center bead on this one, which reminds me I probably should put the little aqua swoop letter C down at the bottom of that. Now I'm going to give that a chance to dry, and I'll add even another layer to that or another element to that with my white Signo. So while I'm waiting for that, I think I'm going to put a little shadow under some of these flowers. Just because I needed something to do while I waited for those things to dry, basically. I might, while I've got this out, I'm going to go ahead and drop shadow this box. So there we are so far. Now I can come in with my Signo. There should have been enough time. And throw a little dot somewhere on these what are supposed to be shiny objects. This is also why I told you if you end up with white spaces somewhere in your coloring, don't sweat them. Let's get a little closer and maybe you guys can see what I'm doing a hair better. So I just put like a little dash, maybe a little dot in some places. I don't I don't really know. I just do it. In the end, it all comes out and has a nice look to it. So a little dot everywhere. Basically everywhere. I'm going to put dots on everything that is supposedly shiny. On this little piece right here, I might come in and do something longer. Maybe even something on that gold part. I don't really need anything here on my flowers, so I'll go down here. If I could fit them, if I can get a little dot to pop up down here on some of these pieces, although it already had a little bit of white showing up in these because I didn't fill them in great. They were super tiny, which made it very hard to do. But that's why I said if you didn't get them filled in properly, don't worry about it, because that almost would be to your benefit. So even in my little tiniest beads, I at least tried to get some speck of a white dot. On this oval one, I came up along that top, and then I might pop a little white dot down there. Simple enough. And I think this might be all of my beads. But now look at the difference and how dimensional those beads kind of look. You could always take that a step further if you wanted to. If you had, I don't think I have an aqua color in any of my, I don't have a matching aqua color in my gel pens, but you could add, if you had one in of like these glittery style or metallic style, you could come in and throw that in something very similar to the way we did with the little C curve at the bottom of those. You could do it with something a little shiny or shimmery if you wanted to add that too. I think I forgot this little guy. And I wanted to add a hair of a darker brown. Let's see what I got handy. Maybe a hair of something darker, since I didn't use the original leather color that I did the first time. I might want to throw a little curve down at the bottom of these leather straps. If you can see that, like just a flick, just a little tiny flick of color. I'm not taking it, oops, that wasn't even one of the straps. I'm not taking that too far. I do need to put some color here on my my dream catcher. So I'm using this lightest beige or tan color that I had. And I just drew all the way around it. I'm going to leave that there because I want to blend a little bit something else into it. I think I'll go back to this Crayola Super Tip thing. And right around those tie-off points, I'm just dotting a little color there. I don't have to stress too much about whether or not a color this fair, this light, or this light is going to bleed through. So now that I've got that down there, I'm going to come back across and pull those colors together a little better. Just blend them together a little better. So there's some dark spots, some light spots. I might even make this lower portion of this. I might run it a little further down. I think I'm getting pretty happy with it so far. So here's what we're looking at. This is just so pretty to me already. I'm going to be a little detail oriented, and I'm taking that light gray again and down to one side, doesn't matter what side, of this right here. I'm throwing in a little gray something. So those almost look like little studded beads standing off the page. And it may only be something that I can notice from here, but this is where I'm at so far. The next or probably last thing that I have to do on this page as far as doodle work or artwork is probably filling in my dream catcher. And I think I'm likely to just cheat, use a circle or some kind of curve, figure out where your middle section is, which is what I'm doing right here. And I'm just going to keep filling this in until it looks like I have wove something into this. And I'm kind of lining up with the middle section and some of those tie-off points that were already made into... I don't even know if this... You know what? I'm just going to freehand it. That's going to take too long. I don't have the patience for that. That's too much. So I don't know if I'm going to get this any kind of decent pattern. I'm kind of thinking about how you'd throw a flower together. And then I'm just going to weave some things in and out of that, or draw some things in and out of that. If that makes any sense. You could absolutely spend the time to outline or do the stencil as it was made. It was just really tiny. The little portions of that to trace, those things were just, that would have gave me such a headache. If you have that kind of patience, I envy you on that. But on something like that that's not really adding that much to me, I'll freehand it and hope for the best. Is it going to be great or as perfectly designed out as real dream catchers? Probably not. But it really boils down to the collection of details that create the idea. And once there's enough details, it is very hard to focus on any one little thing. So, okay, it is not great. That is okay. The concept is there, though. And you still get the idea. So that was still a little fun to me, to just sit there and try and see what I could do on my own. Had I not been being recorded or worried about the time that this has already taken up, I might have sat and tried to do maybe a little better, but I'm not unhappy with any of my results. My next step would be to come in, start adding things like my meal plan now, my weather tracker, all the little spots and places that I need. But for the most part, these are the details that I wanted to share. These are some ideas that I wanted to share. I will very likely be doing these something from this same collection of stencils again this month, and showing some more ideas on how to kind of customize them and make them your own. I really loved this overall design. It definitely feels like Texas to me. There may be a few other things that I would do. I might just come in one more time with my gold under these two spots. And don't worry, because that gel pen is what it is. My shimmer underneath it, my shimmer still shows through this marker. So I would do that. it wasn't even necessary. I'll come in, do a little more of my leather strapping, maybe. I think I'm pretty happy with how everything looks, though, as is. And hopefully I'll get a chance to dive into more of these details later in the month. Hope you enjoyed it. I know my videos get long, but I don't want to miss any details. There was a lot of small details, getting the details on the feathers, getting all the little details on the heads, the headdresses, getting your beads to be shiny and dimensional and all of those things. I don't want to leave any of that stuff out. I have started doing like a fast forward version if you're just looking for the idea concepts. I've started doing like a shortened version of these, but there is things to learn. Even if this is not a theme that you're interested in, some of the things that I share can be used not just for a cow head or a feather. Some of those ideas carry on to really making your doodles look like something, even if you're not all that great skilled. If art is not really your thing, it helps you fake your way in. I'm just throwing a little bit more on here. I'm not even sure why. Just because my markers are sitting here, my paper's still in front of me. That's why. This is how I learn, though. Once I do stuff like this, either I learn, oops, that was a mistake, or oops, I want to do that again. But I love, love, love this look. I hope some of you at least found some enjoyment in it or picked up a thing or two. For me personally, I really loved it. I do see a few things that I could have done better. I was a little off center on this, but you know what? Quick solution. Let me show you right fast. See how off center this looks like it is? I'm going to throw some more leaves on that side. And now it will look a little more centered. Modern day problems require modern day solutions. That was mine. So now at a glance, he looks a little more centered there. Otherwise, I had fun with you guys. I hope you had fun just playing around, getting some ideas for kind of making stencils your own, turning them into something that really feels personalized. This is a far cry different than what they look like right at the beginning. There's certainly a lot more to look at, a lot more details, and part of the reason why I want to do some more of these is because I have so many other ideas for the headdresses that I'm itching so bad to do more. I don't know, the decorating part, the frou-frou part, the smancy stuff. I'm itching to do that. I didn't even take it as far as I could have, because here's a version here in comparison to the version here. I could have taken it so much further, but there was such limited time as it is with so many different ideas. I'll try, if you're interested in me doing a whole nother spread with just the heads this month and frou-frouing those up, let me know in the comments, and I will certainly have fun doing that with you guys.